Hello everyone, member here, Intuitive Link, which for those of you who don't know or can't remember is basically a cast on hit support gem that you cast onto an ally and you will cast all the spells you link on it through your ally when your ally hits an enemy with the 0.5 second cooldown. And you can probably guess from the title and the thumbnail that this build uses the link on the Reaper, which is another very unpopular skill, so that every time the Reaper hits an enemy, it will cast Exsanguinate and maybe Reap, which somehow works very well. Now, using Intuitive Link on a Reaper is a build concept that sounds fun, cool, and a recipe for disaster. I've attempted to make a Reaper build many times ever since the skill was released, and none of them really worked out. The furthest I've gotten with my test character in standard is white maps, because there are so many problems with it to solve. Most of the time it simply doesn't have enough damage, and to get enough damage it will either require sacrificing defense or sacrificing lots of exalted orb that I don't have. But I still really want to make it work at a reasonable budget because it sounds cool and fun, and most of the reason why I like about Path of Exile in the first place is making janky ass build like this and try to make it viable with reasonable budget. Now obviously I found some success on the build, and that's why this video exists. What you're seeing on the screen is the build clearing a juiced up tier 16 yellow map with around 10 to 15 exalts budget. As you can see, it is not top tier zoom fast, but it is going weirdly fast. Have you ever seen a Reaper clear the map with this kind of speed? At least this is the first time I've seen it. My original expectation for this build was to hit tier 11 maps, if I'm lucky, because the POE did not give me a promising DPS number to do tier 16 maps. But somehow this build is the rare case of practice exceed the theory. Now the reason why I gave birth to this build now and not earlier is because it has problems, like I said, lots of it. The most important one is that when your link target dies, you also die. Usually that's not a problem because this skill is designed to be used on other players. So if you have a friend to grind together, you can use this on him and now you have double the clear potential. Dying is not a problem in that case because both characters are played by intelligent people that are probably communicating together. Now my friend over here, his name is Reaper the Reaper. He's not exactly intelligent, and okay, I'll stop pretending I have a friend because it just sounds too sad. But anyways, even though the Reaper is decently tanky, it'll still die to many things if you don't invest a reasonable amount of resource into beefing it up. So I'm gonna start from here to explain the build, tanking the Reaper up. What we need is to take these 3 defensive minion passive circles with link skills can target minion, max resist, and life leech masteries. You will also want the meat shield support for more life and the damage reduction, and anomalous feeding frenzy for the life recovery on hit. Anomalous feeding frenzy will be the main source of sustain for the Reaper, and it is also very expensive, sitting at around 3 exalts minimum. However, if you want to save the money, you can take the Decay Ward passive over here, and it will give you similar results. With the help of Ash of the Star and our weapon, it gives us a lot of gem quality and level, which provides even more beef to the Reaper. The weapon of choice is a staff that has +2 level to all spell skill gem and a benchcraft of +2 level to socketed support gem, and that's all we're after. This weapon will cost you around 6 exalts already. 1 exalt for the +2 spell gem, 3 exalts for the 6th link, and 2 exalts is the cost of the benchcraft. If you do have the money, you can also give it spell damage, damage over time, and physical damage over time. And that would probably cost you a mirror or more, which I think is not really worth it. Finally, the Commander of Darkness and the Plague Bringer Ascendancy passive are the last piece of the puzzle we need to make sure that the Reaper doesn't die. Now the next thing we need to look at is the offensive side of this build. Technically, the Reaper is only contributing around 5% of the total damage. You, the player, are the one that's actually doing the damage through the link. It's like your typical cast on crit Cyclone build, where the Cyclone is only there to trigger the spells. and the spells are the things that's doing the damage. The Reaper is the Cyclone, the Exsanguinates and Reap is the spell. In a cast on crit build, we need to worry about crit chance, hit chance, and attack speed. In this cast when Reaper hits build, we only need to worry about attack speed. We want the attack speed to be a little bit less than 2 times a second, because the cooldown for skills that are linked with Intuitive Link are hard capped at 0.5 seconds, which translates to 2 times a second. We achieve that by first getting the Mindless Aggression and the combination of Mistress of Sacrifice and Divergent Flesh offering. This combination not only provides a minion attack speed that we need, but it also gives movement speed and cast speed to the player, which are both beneficial stats we can use. And because of the extra gem quality from the Ash of the Star, Divergent Flesh offering becomes the biggest boost of attack speed to our Reaper. I've linked Flesh offering with Arcanist Brand, level 10 Arcane Search for easier sustain, and Desecrate, so that Flesh offering will always have corpses to consume. Next, we want Divergent Reaper, Anomalous faster attack, Divergent minion speed, the Anomalous Feeding Frenzy as mentioned earlier, and a Calling Strike. Using the normal Feeding Frenzy for budget won't affect the attack speed, so don't worry. The rest of the alternate quality gems should be very cheap, or at least they are cheap at the time of making this video. These alternate gems also serve the purpose of reducing the cooldown recovery rate for calling your Reaper, since it will often wander off the screen to do its own thing. The weapon and the Ash of the Star also comes into play here, by making the attack speed exactly where we want it and hyper boosting the cooldown recovery rate, so again, these two things are essential. Finally, we look back to the tree for more minion attack speed. We want Spiritual Command and Redemption for the final bits of the attack speed. All these things together will make the attack speed of our Reaper to around 1.95 times per second, which is perfect for what we're after, because we want to have just a little bit less than 2 times a second to account for server lags and delays. Moving on to where the actual damage comes from. We are scaling physical damage over time, so we want the Veteran Soldier physical circle with the damage mastery, the Vanquish circle, Iron Will, and Spiritual Aid is a big one because we do have a decent amount of minion damage being a Necromancer. Our Reaper is not going to utilize it, so we use this passive to actually make use of those damage increase, which contributes to around 30% of our total damage. Another 20 to 30% comes from Pain Attunement, which means we are going low life on this build. As for our main damage link, we use Anomalous Intuitive Link, so we have an easier time sustaining mana. Divergent Exsanguinates for better map clear, Reap, Cruelty, Empower, and Control Destruction. This is your single target setup, and if you have the money, I do strongly suggest to get another weapon, or alternatively you can get some white sockets so you can make the swap. Either way, swapping Reap with Chain and it will basically double your map clear potential. Here we do have a problem to solve, and that is the mana cost issue. Using the Anomalous Intuitive Link alone is not enough to reduce the mana cost to a comfortable level. So we also want to take the Dreamer with the mana cost mastery plus the Tireless passive circle over here. During the leveling process, you might also want to get the Righteous Decree over here if you are still short on mana. You also want a Ring with Life, Vulnerability on hits, and the mana cost reduction benchcraft. If you have the extra money, you can go for Chaos Resist and other stats as you please. Again, the Ash of the Star and the weapon gives us more damage, more target for Exsanguinates, and more mana cost reduction on Intuitive Link. So here is another reason why we need those gears. Our third damage source is Corrupting Fever on the Hungry Loop ring. We want the Hungry Loop to eat Swift Affliction, Brutality, Efficacy, and Empower, and we want to use Anomalous Corrupting Fever to reduce the life cost, otherwise you might not even have enough life to cast it. You would also need to have Cannibalistic Rites anointed on your amulet. Not only it has life cost reduction, decent damage boost, but most importantly, this is your main source of life sustain while mapping. If you have this, you will recover 100% of your life every time the Reaper kills a pack. Next up, the auras. We have Determination, Pride, Malevolence, and War Banner on one link, and Petrified Blood, Arrogance on another. I do have Flame Dash and Molten Shell linked here as well, but Arrogance doesn't affect both of these skills, so that's fine here. Now, using this many auras means we need to take this reservation circle here and another one down here. One with Life Reservation Mastery and one with Mana Reservation Mastery. We also need the Determination Reservation Mastery here as well. Finally, let's have a look at the rest of the gears. For our helmets, body armor, gloves and boots, it's just life and resistance. You should have no trouble getting max elemental resist since the tree does have some resistance already. And getting at least positive chaos resist would also be very easy as well. For belts, I use Cyclopean Coil because it's cheap with lots of life and it helps with our stat requirements. As for jewels, you want a Watcher's Eye with physical damage on Pride, and a careful planning at this spot with a Corrupted Blood implicit. If you can't afford a Corrupted Blood implicit, you can always take one of the resistance circles and pick the Corrupted Blood Mastery as your temporary solution. If you are taking points away for cheaper options, take them from these two circles as they are the least important passes for this build. For flasks, there isn't any hard required flask for this build. Just use anything that you like. I personally use the Elemental Flask for Freeze, Ignites and Bleed Immune since they have a low charge usage. I also use a Rumi's Flask for the armor and block, and a Quicksilver for some move speed. Nothing fancy here. And that's it for the build. This build turns out to be very simple and most of the gears can be bought within 50 chaos per piece. The majority of the money goes into the weapon, Corrupted Blood careful planning, and the Anomalous Feeding Frenzy, which together would cost you around 12 exalts. And you should be able to get the rest of the gears together within 2 to 3x. If you are not using the Corrupted Blood implicits and the Anomalous Feeding Frenzy like I mentioned, then you can cut the cost to around 10 exalts, which is fairly good considering what it is able to achieve. With that said, this is still a janky build concept that shouldn't be working this well. As you can see, it is hard carried by the weapon and the amulets in many levels. I think the amulet has a high chance of not surviving the nerf in the future, and even if it did, the build at this current stage is still not anywhere near your feel good build, so I wouldn't give the build much expectation. However, if you are one of the people who loves the Reaper, this is at least a build concept out there for more inspirations. Anyways, that's it for today. Subscribe for extra mirror drop chance. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.